In the spring of 2016, quarterback Brock Osweiler had it all. He was a Super Bowl champion and had just signed a 4-year, $70 million contract that would make him Houston's franchise quarterback. Fast forward to just a year later, and the Texans had to give away draft picks just to get Osweiler off the books. 2 years later, he was out of football altogether. This is the absolutely bizarre rise and fall of Brock Osweiler, aka the Brocket Launcher, Brock Lobster, Brocktober, a Brockwork Orange, Brock and Roll Hoochie Cooch, Brock You Like a Hurricane, Brock Bottom. The Brocket Launcher. Did I say that? Brock Osweiler had more nicknames than touchdowns, but that's just because he had 1,000 nicknames. Today, we're going to talk about how one decision sent him to 2 of the worst organizations in the NFL, and how he is remembered as the quarterback the Texans couldn't give away, instead of the stabilizing force that kept the 2015 Denver Broncos afloat on their path to Super Bowl 50. Today, we go balls deep into Brocket Man! Hey, it's Black Friday, and you know what that means? It means I get to pinch you if you're not wearing black. Oh, that's St. Patrick's Day. Anyway, BenchwarmerBrew.com, we dropped our 8-bit shirts. And right now, all of my coffee for Black Friday is buy one, get one 50% off. It is a great gift to give for Christmas. Pair it with a nice mug. Do whatever you want. Just go buy my shit, benchwarmerbrew.com. Buy one, get one 50% off. And the orange 8-bit shirts. This is Brock Osweiler. Flathead High School voted him most likely to be famous back in 2009, and God dang it, they were right. And it's in the name. Flathead High School prophesied that Osweiler would one day back up Mr. Flathead himself, Peyton Manning. Now, coming out of Flathead, Brock was an accomplished quarterback, and at 6'7", a skilled basketball player as well. Osweiler actually committed to nearby Gonzaga for basketball, but decided to focus on football instead.
I was maybe 10 seconds into the conversation, and he goes, "Brock, I already know why you're calling." I was like, "You do?" And he goes, "I sat next to Dennis Erickson on a flight."
The legend is that Osweiler chose Arizona State because they had a direct flight from Kalispell to Phoenix, but something tells me that he chose Arizona State for the same reason a lot of other guys choose Arizona State. And it's not the education. Now, when Osweiler got to ASU, his neighbor in the dorms was also a quarterback. One by the name of Elway. No, not John Elway, you fucking idiots, his son, Jack. Do you have any comprehension of time? Jack Elway went to ASU. And we don't quite know what kind of hell those two rose together, but even though Jack Elway retired from football, it sounds like he put in the good work for Brock. But before Osweiler became a Denver Bronco, he spent 3 seasons as a Sun Devil. His first 2 seasons, he didn't hit the field much, but he ended up getting the starting job his junior year after the retirement of quarterback Stephen Threet. Osweiler put together a nice season, surpassing 4,000 yards through the air and throwing twice as many touchdowns as interceptions. Osweiler led 6-6 ASU to the Las Vegas Bowl, where they promptly had their asses kicked by Boise State, who were led by future Cowboys offensive coordinator Kellen Moore and future Pro Bowler Doug Hamster Muscle Martin. But this effort by Osweiler on a 100-yard pick six to flop a tackle is pretty legendary. But even after 1 full season at the helm, scouts decided they had seen enough, which encouraged Brock to declare for the NFL draft after throwing just 33 touchdowns in his college football career. Now, if you look at Osweiler's games at ASU, you'll notice that he had this kind of 3-quarter delivery, which in a strange way managed to negate some of his height. He also threw a lot of bubble screens in Noel Mazzone's offense, which might have given his numbers a nice boost, but that's just college football, right? There was also something intriguing about him that I think piqued the interest of scouts. Yes, he was big like Joe Flacco or Peyton Manning, but he could also move. Walter Football said that the most unique trait about Osweiler is his mobility. This was 1 year after Cam Newton was drafted, and I think that got scouts really interested in quarterbacks with both size and speed. Had Osweiler waited and played his senior year at ASU, I think there's reason to believe that he could have become a top 10 pick. Instead, he decided to join one of the most stacked quarterback classes of all time, rounding out a group that included Andrew Luck, RG3, Ryan Tannehill, and of course 2 Super Bowl champions in the later rounds with Russell Wilson and Big Dick Nick Foles, and the lone wolf, Kirk Cousins. Now, the Denver Broncos didn't need a quarterback. They had just signed Peyton Manning to a 4-year deal, but they wanted their heir apparent to groom under Manning. I don't know if you're supposed to say groom anymore, but I think it's okay in this context. There was also serious concerns at the time about Peyton Manning's ability to just throw a football after missing the 2011 season to get 300 neck surgeries. So the Broncos did also want a young QB as an insurance policy in case Manning's neck didn't hold up. So taking one in a deep QB class made sense. Now, Osweiler was selected in the second round with pick number 57, and one of the great mysteries is what would have happened had the Broncos drafted Russell Wilson instead, who ended up going a few picks later in the third round. In the fourth round, the Broncos selected corner Omar Bolden, who was also from Arizona State. So, yeah, I think John Elway probably just took who he liked from the school that his son attended. And that pick is significant because Mike Shanahan indeed liked Elway's pick and grabbed Kirk Cousins 1 slot later. A lot of what ifs from this draft. Anyway, Osweiler didn't get to see the field much in his first 3 years as a Denver Bronco. Peyton Manning simply didn't get hurt, meaning the only opportunity for Brock to get action was when the Broncos were blowing out their opponent, which was the only reason he attempted 30 passes from 2012 to 2014. The art of the garbage time throw. Now there was, of course, the famous clip of Brock Osweiler looking for his helmet, trying to enter a blowout against the Raiders in 2014. Meanwhile, Peyton Manning kept his helmet on at all times and never wanted to miss a snap and forced Osweiler back to the bench. But when Manning did get hurt in November of 2015 against the Chiefs, a game where Manning broke the all-time passing yards record, in the midst of throwing 4 picks, because that's how good Peyton Manning was, Osweiler got his chance, and it looked like he might have the job for the rest of the season. Osweiler was inheriting a 7-2 football team with an all-time elite defense, so his job for the most part was to not fuck things up. And he did a really good job at not fucking things up. After throwing 2 touchdowns and defeating the Bears in his first career start, Brock went toe-to-toe with Tom Brady in the snow on Sunday Night Football and led a 14-point comeback before vanquishing the Patriots in overtime. I was there, and in my biased opinion, this was one of the greatest regular season games of all time. Osweiler checked to a toss left in overtime, and C.J. Bash Anderson took it all the way to seal the deal. Now, Brock would struggle at times after this game, including a collapse after a 4-touchdown first half in Pittsburgh, but he led another comeback against the Bengals on Monday Night Football that earned the Broncos a playoff spot. And Brock, I believe, had earned the right to start a playoff game at that point. But it's hard to account for Peyton Manning looking over your shoulder. Even if you're 6'8" like Brock, Manning didn't have to stand on his tiptoes to look over your shoulder. In week 17, with the first seed on the line in a division game against the Chargers, Peyton Manning dressed as a backup for the first and only time in his career. Osweiler didn't play badly in this game. In fact, the offense was moving the ball incredibly well against the Chargers, but the Broncos kept turning the ball over 4 times in the first half, and it just felt like they needed the veteran leadership that only Peyton Manning could give them. Unless, of course, you ask that dipshit Phil Simms.
Bring out Peyton Manning.
Yeah, I heard that too.
You don't expect to see that.
No, I do not.
Head coach Gary Kubiak made the switch to Manning after C.J. Anderson fumbled on the Broncos' first offensive drive after halftime. Again, not Osweiler's fault. But when Peyton Manning took the field, it was at that moment that Brock Osweiler's agent, Jimmy Sexton, turned to his wife and parents in the stands and said, "We're gonna get him out of here." And after the game, Kubiak apologized to an emotional Osweiler and told him exactly what he needed to hear. He had permission to drink as much beer as he needed. Permission granted. It's not odd for a QB to be benched in a 5-turnover game, but it's incredibly odd for a QB to get benched when maybe only one of those turnovers was indeed his fault. And despite winning a Super Bowl that season, Brock was out of there. We should have all known he'd land with the Browns when this TMZ video emerged of Brock pushing a woman to the ground with a pizza box in his hand, but bravely showing restraint when a man attacked him. Now, Brock Osweiler shocked the NFL in March of 2016 when he signed a 4-year, $72 million deal with the Houston Texans instead of returning to the Broncos. The Broncos were left without a quarterback, and the Texans had seemingly found theirs, and Brock and the Broncos were on such bad terms that John Elway's phone calls were going directly to Brock's voicemail. Brock even skipped the team's trip to the White House, and not for political reasons, for spite. Osweiler would later say that he regretted ignoring John Elway's phone calls and wishes he had remained a Bronco. No shit, Brock. In an interview with Sports Illustrated, Osweiler said, "I wouldn't even have picked up John's calls. I would have called John 2 weeks before that and told him, listen, I want to be a Bronco until I die. If you want me, let's get this done." That is hindsight. Probably the most bizarre part of Brock's trade to Houston, well, not that bizarre if you know the Texans and how they're run, but head coach Bill O'Brien did not want Osweiler to be his next QB. Osweiler was forced upon him by, at the time, team owner Bob McNair. Not that we should trust anything Bill O'Brien would ever want to do in free agency, but at the bare minimum, the head coach and owner/GM should both be a hard yes on a guy at the QB position before inking him to a massive contract.
And look at this, Osweiler is benched. Tom Savage is coming into the game, and the fans here in Houston go nuts.
Now, it's easy to see why Osweiler felt this way after the fact, because with all those expectations placed upon his shoulders in Houston, he simply did not deliver. You have to play pretty badly to win a playoff game and still get replaced as a starting quarterback. But that's what happened with Osweiler. Brock threw just 15 touchdowns and 16 picks for the Texans, and on Monday Night Football in a matchup against his old team, Osweiler was thoroughly defeated by 7th-round pick Trevor Siemian Toast Crunch. Osweiler did have some impediments that season, though, like, having to coexist with Bill O'Brien and having a laser pointer shined in his eyes in Mexico City during a loss against the Raiders. And Mexican laser beams don't have blinding restrictions like the weak-ass ones made here in America do.
Scientists love lasers.
Now, Osweiler may have suffered some permanent blindness from that laser pointer for all we know. There was also an incident in Week 17 between Osweiler and Bill O'Brien, some kind of loud argument or possibly a physical altercation that spelled the end for Brock in Houston. My only question is, did Bill O'Brien try and take a slice of pizza away from Brock Osweiler?
He started it. He ate my pizza on purpose.
Ultimately, to get rid of Brock and his albatross of a contract, the Texans had to ship the 5-year vet, a 2nd-rounder, and a 6th-rounder to the Browns. One of the few teams who could absorb that contract with no consequences. Obviously, you usually get the picks in return for a player. Not this time. That turned out to be a good trade for Cleveland, who was in the business of stockpiling draft picks at the time, and because that 2nd-round pick turned out to be running back Nick Chubb, who's still one of the best backs in the league. especially if you ask Derrick Henry. And that's 5.5 years after that trade went down. Now, the Browns were never interested in Osweiler as a player. Although they might, have won a single game in 2017 had they played him over DeShone Kizer. The Browns were being compared to the 76ers at the time and were the first team really associated with tanking in the NFL, if I recall correctly. The Browns were so committed to this philosophy that they fucking cut Osweiler before the season even started. To be clear, Brock Osweiler signed a 4-year, $72 million contract in Houston, was shipped to Cleveland after one season with the Texans. The Browns signed Osweiler in March and then cut him in September before he played a single snap with the Browns in the regular season. And the job was given to a QB who was far worse than Osweiler in DeShone Kizer. Again, I think the Browns knew that. But to put this in perspective, Osweiler was playing a bit better than, say, 2021 Andy Dalton, Daniel Jones, and rookies Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, and Zach Wilson, but was being treated like the single worst quarterback to ever play the game. So, the Browns cut Brock, and a year and a half after he left them at the altar, Osweiler rejoined the Denver Broncos with his tail tucked between his long-ass legs. And an injury to Paxton Lynch allowed John Elway to bring back his other tall drink of water just days after the Browns cut him, where Osweiler earned the backup job in Denver.
He looks better. He looks sharp out here today.
35. That's on cue.
Osweiler's decline, though, between 2015 and 2017 was very apparent. But so was the decline in the team around him. He was no longer being coached by Gary Kubiak, who had gotten the best out of Osweiler. And the team had embarked on a long skid that was stopped only by a Thursday night matchup in Indianapolis. In his last moment of greatness as a Denver Bronco, Brock Osweiler took the field in relief of Trevor Siemian against the Colts on national television in their Color Rush uniforms, threw 2 touchdowns and ran for a third as the Broncos got the win, making him the polar opposite of Kirk Cousins as he always shined in prime time. Brock Osweiler played just one more season after this game, his 7th and final in the NFL, putting together a few nice moments with the Dolphins and head coach Adam Gase, who had coached him early in his career in Denver. Which leads me to the final absurd thing in regard to Osweiler's career. He was one of the few humans on earth who played better football at QB with Adam Gase as his head coach. And he joined the Dolphins because the other Broncos QB who left the city disgruntled at his peak, Jay Cutler, retired. Ultimately, Osweiler called it quits after earning $41 million in his career. He's now able to spend time with his wife and 2 daughters and spends college football Saturdays as a color commentator for ESPN. So things worked out. He's got a good life. He's made a ton of money and he's got a ring. But there's always a little bit of what if for Brock Osweiler. What if he hadn't left for Houston? And Brock knew this once his career ended. And he mentioned it when he talked to Greg Bishop from Sports Illustrated. What if he had stayed with Denver in 2016? Well, we might have won the Super Bowl the next year, Osweiler said. Don't you tease me like that, Brock. Don't you tease me. Maybe that could have happened. One thing I know for sure, the Broncos would not have drafted Paxton Lynch in the first round of the 2016 NFL Draft. John Elway would not have seen a need to replace one 6'7" or 6'8" QB with another. And I wouldn't have ever had to make this Paxton Lynch forgotten bust video. That said, I agree the production probably would have been better with Osweiler, with Gary Kubiak, and a team returning so many of its starters. But we're not going to play the what-if game. Thanks for watching That's Good Sports' bizarre career of the Brocket Launcher. Feel free to check out another video. YouTube's recommending you one on the screen. Is that something you would like to watch? I don't fucking know.